The ground shook, not with the rhythm of an earthquake, but as if something enormous were crawling. Beneath the fiery red rock, a deep, chest-deep roar came from the ground. Then boom! A huge boulder was thrown up, taking a soldier with it. They only had time to shout a single word before they disappeared. Run! But it was too late. The surface of Zelion 9, already unstable, was now cracking apart. The probes were sucked down into the fissures. Red dust mixed with hot ash obscured the view. And the air was thick with the smell of burning ozone. A female voice came over the radio, urgent. "It's not an earthquake. It has a rhythm." No one had time to answer. Followed by a screeching sound, as if hundreds of metals were rubbing against each other underground. And then silence. Talia Marin opened her eyes again as the roar faded. She was lying on her side on a black rock slope, her armor torn at her left shoulder, her protective mask broken on one side. Blood oozing from her right ear. Below her was a sinkhole over 40 meters wide, a deep pit. And in its heart, a layer of dark red lava flowing like hot blood. There was no one alive around her, no human voices. Only a flickering communicator and an oxygen gauge that said 258. Talia struggled to her feet, her head woozy, her chest tight from lack of oxygen. She turned on her personal voice recorder, the only thing that was still working properly, and whispered. "This is Bio Officer Talia Marin, Delta 7 unit destroyed. Target unknown, but it responds to a low resonance frequency." "Repeat, it heard us. It learned from me." She paused. A quiet rumble came from deep underground, like an answer. Not a natural sound, not the sound of cracking rock or spewing magma. It was a whisper imitating human speech. Talia had heard this before in classified documents. Creatures that did not see, but sensed with waves. Things that had no eyes, but could repeat the voices of their victims. They called it the Thresher Worm, a legend, a forbidden story. Something that should not exist. Now it was somewhere below her feet listening. There was no choice. The mother station could not reach Zelion 9 for the next 16 hours due to the plasma storm. Talia had no heavy weapons, no teammates, only her voice. And her unique sound sense that she had kept hidden for her entire career, afraid of being cut from the team. That was all she had now. Talia checked the helmet. The glass was cracked, but the audio amplifier still had a live circuit. She hooked up a temporary biosignal cable, tuned it to her left arm, where she had implanted the artificial resonance tissue, and began to record the sound the creature was making. It was low, long, unsteady, like a mating call. Mating. Talia paled. If she was right, and the sound was a mating call, then the underground creature wasn't attacking to kill, but because it thought. Her unit was part of a ritual. And if so, she could replicate the frequency, lead it, trick it, lure it into the lava lake. But to do that, she would have to leave the safe zone. Step into the center of the broadcast, its lair, and let out a final call in her own voice. She took a deep breath, the scent of blood and burning smoke mixed together. Alone, 3 hours of oxygen, a half-broken device. And a giant monster, in love. This was no longer a biological mission. This was a final symphony between man and beast. And Talia Marin, its final conductor. Talia Marin grew up amid the rock drilling and heavy vibrations of the Aurora 6 mine belt. Her father was a blasting engineer, her mother a mine safety supervisor. Their family meals were often interrupted by the sound of earthquakes. Talia had learned from a young age to know what kind of shock would cause a collapse simply by lying face down on the concrete floor and listening. The only thing that made her different and what they called weird was her ears. Not because they were hard of hearing, but because they heard too well. At the age of 8, Talia had been warned by her teacher for imitating her friends' voices with terrifying accuracy. She hadn't meant to, she'd simply. Her ears caught the way their voices vibrated, and her throat mimicked them without thinking. Once in the underground mine, when the alarm went off incorrectly, it was Talia who shouted, "That's not a heat alarm. That's a rockfall." The three survivors believed in her. But from then on, they also began to fear her. As an adult, Talia did not choose to follow her parents into the mining industry. She joined the Geosensory Research Alliance, a little-known branch that analyzed life vibrations on unexplored planets. Her goal was not to fight, not to explore, it was to hear. Hear how the planet breathes through the magma. Hear how microorganisms layer and resonate in the rock. Hear and understand, so that humans do not destroy but coexist. She once said to the instructor at Sigma 5, "We don't need more lenses. We need more ears to listen." The words were not included in the report, but they were remembered and passed on to one person in particular, Captain Arvin of the Delta 7 Survey Unit. In a brief flashback, in the midst of the jumble of memories after the earthquake, Talia recalled the first time they met. Arvin, a large, quiet man, asked her, "I heard you can detect tremors without equipment." Talia smiled, put her hand on the floor of the hold, and closed her eyes. "Your stride has an amplitude of 1.4 hertz. You're left-footed, and you carry a heavy device on your right hip." "A transmitter," Arvin chuckled. "I need someone who can listen. Not someone who can talk. Are you okay? As long as the ground has something to tell." So she was sent to Zelion 9, a volcanically active planet with chaotic geology and strange biosignals from its depths. On the third day, she sounded the alarm. There's a deep, cyclical, repeating tremor. It's not geological, it's like a signal. It has a pattern. It's listening. She was left out of subsequent meetings. "Don't talk about emotions with hot rocks, Marin," said a technical officer. "There are only two things here, volcanoes and resources." But Talia kept recording. She placed passive sensors all over the Southern Valley Basin, what she called the Echo Trench. And there, for the first time, she picked up the low, repeating rumble that the drilling unit was making in time. Not the sound of rocks bouncing off. It was purposely created. She dashed into the control station, sending out an emergency signal. It's not just digging. It's listening back, it's mimicking. Then suddenly the signal cut off. Outside, the ground exploded. Back in the present, sitting alone at the edge of the lava pit, Talia recalled the last sentence in her diary that day. "If voices can bring creatures to you, can silence keep them at bay?" Now, she had no silence to hide in. There was only her and the roar from underground, resonating like a human voice. Talia removed a piece of the audio filter from her helmet. She hooked it up to the biosensor on her wrist. A signal vibrated, responsive to the frequency she had recorded in the echo groove. Beneath the red-hot earth, the creature was repeating her voice. But distorted, deeper, longer. Once again it called. She whispered almost unconsciously, "Okay, if you can hear, then listen carefully." Talia's eyes turned to a rough stone bridge leading into the core of the volcano, where the strongest resonance signal had ever appeared, and where she would have to call out her final voice. The air in the ancient volcano's funnel was so thick that every time Talia breathed, her chest felt as if someone was squeezing it from within. This was the dead zone on the survey map, a place where the ancient basalt was supposed to have solidified forever. There was no geothermal activity, no biological signals, and most importantly, no living thing large enough to survive here. But Talia knew that nothing was only true if people didn't listen. She stopped on a high rock, removed the broken glass still attached to her face shield, and plugged in the simple amplifier she'd cobbled together from her personal gear. When she pressed start, A deep rumble immediately echoed back, as if the mountain itself were moaning. Not the wind, not the earth shaking, but a melody stretched, distorted, and sad. The last recording from the Delta 7 unit came from the recorder, a middle-aged man's voice, muffled. "If she says it's alive, listen to her. I should've. Talia gripped the device, her eyes wet not from the smoke. She still remembered the last time she saw the chief engineer Lanrick, who had rejected all her analysis, lying next to her in the research tent, whispering when the two of them were the only ones awake. Sometimes, the strangest thing is not the creatures out there, but the people themselves, when they dare to believe what their ears cannot hear and their eyes cannot see." Now he was gone, but that strange was singing right under her feet. Talia continued to move deeper into the funnel. On both sides were cracked cliffs like torn skin. The surface had deep, regular grooves, not ordinary geological marks, but resonant amplification systems. She placed her palm on a smooth rock surface like the surface of a stringed instrument. As soon as her skin touched it, a slight but distinct vibration rang out, traveling back into the bones of her arm. Talia pulled her hand back reflexively, her heart pounding. No equipment needed, she sensed a presence. Something was lying very close. And it responded to her touch, there was no doubt. This was where the creature had, or was using to locate itself. A resonance nest. She began to hear the roar more clearly, no longer a vague echo, but a point of origin. From the center of the funnel, under the thin layer of lava like the skin of a lake. Talia backed away. A plasma bolt streaked across the sky, illuminating the red rock. She could run, climb the slope west, sending out an emergency signal, hoping someone would pick it up. But something inside her stopped her feet. A small sound came from the device. The old frequency she had recorded, the deep low frequency that had revealed the creature the day before. She adjusted it slightly, increased the amplitude slightly. The device vibrated. Talia stood still, her heart matching the vibrations. Then from below, as if in answer, a long, deep growl like her own, but not quite. It grew longer, rising in pitch at the end, then paused as if waiting for a response. A voice singing, a call. Talia shivered, not with fear, but with the realization that she had heard that melody before. Not in the cave, but in ancient biowave recordings. Used by creatures who knew bioresonance communication during their reproductive years. She recalled the old lesson, the blood in her head rushing to a single thought. This is a mating call. Talia suddenly understood. The creature had not attacked the survey team in self-defense, but because of a misunderstanding. The drilling equipment was generating frequencies similar to the call. The voices of people talking, screeching through the pipes, all were picked up by it as mating signals. She pulled out a frequency simulator, adjusted the oscillation frequency to match. Added a snippet of her own voice, low-pitched, long-drawn. A kind of call, soft but with emphasis inviting. She wasn't sure, but if it was right, the creature would respond. She pressed play. A few seconds passed in silence. Then the ground shook. The rock beneath her feet heaved slightly, as if pushed by something enormous. She backed away. From a gap in the center of the funnel, a black mass rose, glistening with fiery scales and no eyes. But its every movement was directed toward the device in her hand. It heard her and answered. Talia trembled. Not with fear, but with the truth. If she could control the frequency, she could guide it. She whispered, her eyes never leaving the creature that was slowly rising from the ground. Then listen. Listen one last time. She turned, ran toward the second resonance rock, the one closest to the mouth of the lava lake. Behind her, the giant creature began to slither, its roars matching the rhythm she had created, a deathly harmony. The sky above Zelian 9 turned to ash. The coils of dust and gas screeched together, sending bolts of plasma crashing to the red earth. Talia no longer cared about the weather. She was racing down the black rock that led to the edge of the lava pool, the only place deep enough, hot enough, to swallow the creature whole, if she could guide it to the right resonance point. On her wrist, the biofrequency simulator was still glowing green, but the heat warning light had turned a bright red. The temperature was rising too fast. The quartz she was using as an oscillator was about to melt. There was no time. She paused, plucking a piece of crystal from the surrounding rock, natural quartz, spear-shaped, glowing faintly. She attached it to the device, adjusting the resonance frequency. The sound came out broken, muffled, not quite right. Talia closed her eyes. What was needed was not vibration, it was voice. She spoke softly, long, deep, and repeated, a series of sounds that were both biological signals and the soft sound of someone calling someone's name in the night. When the quartz vibrations were combined with her voice, the device emitted a steady, round, long-lasting ringing sound like a song from the other side of the abyss. At that moment the ground shook, not like before, not a dull tremor, but a steady tremor, like the sound of giant footsteps, slithering with the entire body. Talia turned. A fissure tore the ground behind her. The rock shattered like a door being kicked down. The thresher worm appeared. As tall as a 4-story building, its skin roughened with a dark red like cold metal. Its spiral body covered with hollow scales that amplified sound like a flute. It had no eyes, but every part of its body was a perfect resonator, enough to detect the slightest vibration. And it was turning toward her, not with its eyes but with its listening. Talia held the device to her chest, her hands shaking. She had seen a man dragged underground in silence. No blood, no screams, just strange vibrations ringing in her ears. She had thought it was just mimicking sound, but now she heard something else. The creature began to emit a deep bass tone, the same frequency as she had just played, but then it shifted, distorted, and suddenly reproduced the call of a man's voice. "Marin, run, it's under." She froze. It was the voice of Engineer Lanrick, her old comrade. The last person she had ever spoken to. The words were cut off. But now they were repeated by the creature, not because it understood. Because it remembered. It learned through sound and stored everything it had ever heard, even the cries for help. Talia began to cry, tears mixed with sweat, but they did not fall. Not out of guilt, she thought, but because, now I know it doesn't kill for revenge. It kills like someone, looking for a mate and repeating what it has heard like a child learning a language. She whispered, her hand tightening on the device, "Then listen one last time." The mouth of the lava lake appeared, a hollow rock, below which a sea of red fire rolled. In the middle was a protruding stone platform, where the heat was strongest, creating a natural resonance. In the middle, Talia placed the transmitter. She increased the frequency, adding her own voice, a soft, suggestive call. Similar to the biological frequency she had analyzed for core creature sonar mating behavior. The sound resonated. Come, not a command, an invitation. Come. The thresher worm accelerated. Its entire body arched to the rhythm of the waves, not in fury, but in ecstasy. Like a giant creature entering an ancient mating ritual. Each layer of rock beneath its feet melted from heat and gravity. As the creature placed its central body into the resonance zone, the entire mouth of the lake shrank. At that moment, the bedrock broke. A large fissure opened, lava spurted upwards, and the thresher worm screamed. No more calls, no more voices, only a low howl like a song played wrongly, choked and shattered in the fire. Talia backed away, dodging the heat. She didn't cheer. She didn't laugh. She just watched the creature, once a deadly legend, writhe in the red fire. Trying to reproduce the last sound, "Come," in her own voice. She turned on the receiver, recording the sound, and then turned it off. Not to keep the monster's voice, but to remember that even a killer was just calling someone's name. Lava boiled at the bottom of the lake. Steam rose thick as smoke, blurring vision. Talia stood motionless on the edge of the burning rock, her body trembling, one hand clutching her chest, the other clutching the frequency simulator. She had done it. She had let it in, but it wasn't dead. From within the sea of fire, the groans rang out, not roaring. Not as fierce as before, but distorted, broken, like a creature learning to call for help. A giant arm of the creature slammed into the lake. Red, charred, smoking scales fell in waves like ash from a once invulnerable body. The thresher worm tried to pull itself out of the lava, each part of its body crawling upward like a slow-motion film. But what took Talia's breath away wasn't its vitality. It was the sound it made, co calm, incomplete. But her voice, she being called by a creature in the same distorted pitch of her half-burned body. Talia took a half step back, her heart pounding. Since childhood, she had known the feeling of being frightened by your own voice. Her voice, when she repeated the frequency, sounded inhuman. Too round, too melodious. Each word sounded like it was calibrated by a machine again. Adults looked at her with strange eyes. Friends said, "You sound like a monster in a movie." So she learned to be silent, just listen, no talk. She had kept her voice hidden all her teenage years, until she entered the resonance bio unit. There, for the first time, she was praised, not for speaking correctly, but for sounding different. Now, for the first time in years, she heard her voice rising from the lowest reaches of life and death. The device in her hand flashed. It had a setting, a safe broadcast, a neutral. Steady frequency, used to soothe semi-intelligent creatures in research camps. Talia could activate it, and the creature, if it sensed it, would not panic. Would give up, die, but peacefully, or she could do nothing. Let it continue to scream, crawling out of the lava pool, struggling in its own despair, and die in chaos. Like so many creatures killed by humans throughout history. She looked down, it no longer a monster, just a living thing burning, panicking, clinging to the only sound it understood. A call. Talia closed her eyes. If it had been her as a child, when she was considered faulty because her voice didn't sound human, if at that moment someone had played back to her a soft voice, a whisper of "it's okay. Keep going," she wouldn't have been silent for so many years. Wouldn't have lived as if her voice were a wound. Talia opened her eyes. Pressed a button. The device vibrated. A soft wave played, steady, steady, not harsh, like a lullaby. Her voice, not a command, not a call for love, but simple comfort. "It's okay, you can let go now." The sound echoed down the mouth of the lake. The creature stopped crawling. It spoke again, weaker. Let go. Its whole body retreated inch by inch. No more struggling, no more calling, only silence. The lava swallowed it in the next moment, no sound. No explosion. Only a final ripple spreading across the ground, faint as a sonic thank you. Talia dropped the device, fell to her knees. Her whole body shook with exhaustion. She no longer cried, no more breathing, only her chest heaving in silence. No victory, no glory, only a decision that one last creature would not die in fear. She exhaled softly, then she fell to her side unconscious. But on her lips there was still a slight tremor, as if she had laughed. 6 hours after the last creature sank into the lava, an emergency rescue team landed on Zelian 9 in a specialized lander. Not because they heard a distress signal, but because a strange interference had permeated the plasma. Carrying a deep recording, half biofrequency, half human. "It's okay, you can let go now." Talia Marin was found unconscious at the mouth of the lava lake, 12 km from the initial survey site. Her armor was burned, her mask cracked, but the sound simulator was still working. The data and the protective memory kept the engineering team silent for hours. No one could explain it. No bombs, no bullets, just sound. A complex resonance recording, designed with human voices. And a creature, once a terrifying legend, now no longer exists. When Talia woke up, she didn't ask who saved her, nor did she tell the details. Just one sentence: it died because it finally heard what it needed. The answer was not in the official report. 3 days later, at the reconnaissance meeting of the biosensor unit, her name was mentioned along with countless arguments. It's impossible to guide a creature of that size into the lava without a navigation device. She's not a warrior. A human voice can't replace biosensory waves. One person, the former female commander, said only, but it happened. Talia was offered a promotion. She refused. She also refused the invitation to return to Delta Unit. Instead, she applied for a transfer to the Ariane 3 research station, an ocean planet where the natives communicate with waves and silence. The reason given in the application: I need a place where no human voices are reflected. Before leaving, she submitted a single report. Not long, not scientific, just a short paragraph. Taken from her last diary entry, some monsters weren't attacking. They were calling. Some voices weren't screaming. They were echoes waiting to be heard right. The report was filed in the unofficial reference section. But a young student quoted it, circulating it as a kind of philosophy. Not every roar is a threat. Sometimes it's just someone's way of learning to say, I'm here. On Zelian 9, after the incident, no more underground tremors were reported. The magma layer was unusually stable. The rocks stopped cracking. The winds that blew across the land no longer echoed. A geologist once described it in his diary. The planet seems to have taken its last breath. It is silent now, not because it is dead, but because it is in mourning. The thresher worm, the giant creature once referred to as a paleontological ghost, is gone. But there are no remains, no corpses, only a kilometer-wide depression with a mirror-like surface, imprinted exactly where the strongest resonance had once been. Some researchers call it the soundless tomb. Talia never returned to Zelian 9. She lived in a floating station on Ariane 3, recording the movements of the water, learning to decipher the faintest calls, not from sounds, but from the silence between waves. It is said that every time it rained, she would sit by the lake, put her ear to the wooden floor and listen. Not to record data, but to not forget that one day she was called by a monster in her own voice. An old friend before retirement asked her during a video call, "If you had broadcast destruction instead of safety that day, would things have been easier?" Talia chuckled. "Maybe. But easy doesn't mean right." She raised her glass of clear seawater. Sometimes, being human isn't about winning by screaming. It's about knowing when to whisper, so someone can leave without fear. In the official reports, Talia Marin was mentioned as a biosensory agent who was present during the Zelian 9 incident. No medals, no honors. Her name was quietly placed in the technical notes, along with an audio file marked unreproducible. No one mentioned that she survived without firing a shot. No one described that the Titanic destroyer, the thresher worm, fell not because it was destroyed, but because it was heard properly, not by technology, not by special abilities, but by one thing. Talia refused the familiar reflex of humanity to destroy what they do not understand. She had been mocked for her ability to resonate. She had been called a human recorder. She had learned to be silent so as not to make others uneasy with a voice so perfect, so different. But on the planet Zelian 9, it was that difference that saved her and ended a horror that had lasted for centuries. Because instead of screaming in fear, she whispered. Because instead of running away, she stepped forward. Because instead of retaliating, she responded in a voice that made sense. After that event, she left the Strategic Biological Training Center, a place that had been the dream of many. No one stopped her. No one understood why. Only a few people saw a strange device she had designed and left in the research warehouse, not a weapon, but a system for receiving and decoding nonverbal sounds. A single line was engraved on it. Some monsters weren't attacking. They were calling. Talia lived on Arian 3, a planet with no human voices. No machines. Only water waves and strange creatures that transmitted signals in silent rhythms. She spent years building a small station, not to transmit signals, but to listen. She called it the listening station. Someone who came later asked her, "What are you looking for?" She replied, "I'm not looking for anything. I'm just waiting for a call from someone who doesn't know how to shout." On a long rainy night, as water poured onto the roof of the tower, creating random musical notes, she wrote in her last diary, not to anyone, not to share, just to leave it. Being human was never about silencing the unknown. It was about choosing how to answer it, even when it grew like a beast. In an age where every device is designed to record voice, few people remember. There are things that need to be heard. Not every roar is a threat. Not every difference is a danger. Sometimes they are just calls. No one has ever answered them properly. The last piece of advice she left, not as a slogan, but engraved on the case of her first simulator, now displayed as an unknown curio in the Technical Museum. If you're human, don't ask how loud you can scream. Ask if, when something roars in the dark, you still know how to listen without fear. On a distant planet in a purple twilight, a young student visited the listening post, asking, "Do you believe there are creatures like the thresher worm?" Talia smiled, looking out at the rippling lake. "I'm not sure. But I know there are many things, still learning to name what they need. And if no one hears, they repeat it by herding." The student was silent. Then asked softly, "In that case, how do we know which is the call, which is the attack?" Talia looked at him for a long time, then answered, "By not shooting first." Not far from the listening post, there was a round stone carved by hand. No name, no date, only a single line written by unknown author. "Listen so no one has to scream anymore."